Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. What's good? You know the vibes. Jon Jeune here at the real Jon J _FF. And I'm back with my week 5 fantasy football matchup show. Y'all, I really do appreciate all the love and support. We've gotten some new members to the Patreon. We've got some new members to support the show tier on Patreon. If you're not already plugged into that, make sure you are. You get a weekly cheat sheet for just being a member of the Patreon page. It has waiver wire information, matchup insights, player trends, rankings, and a lot more. So make sure you check that out. Also, if you join the support the show tier, then that gives you access to a weekly waiver wire article, expanded rankings, as well as access to a Sunday morning Q&A chat with me, where I'll answer any of your lineup questions, trade questions, whatever questions you may have. And that is actually free this week. And after this week, you have to join the support the show tier. The great news about that, the support the show tier is only $1 a month, right? So I think it's great value. I've been told it is pretty great value. So make sure you're tapped into that. But today is the matchup show. And so we've got to look at all the games that we have left for the week and try to determine which players we're going to play in these games, right? So we're looking at wide receivers and running backs inside that top or outside that top 20 that we feel like should deserve a look. Quarterbacks and tight ends outside that top 10 that we feel like deserve a look. So, and also could look at guys within those thresholds that maybe we should pump the brakes on a little bit. So that's what the matchup show is about. So let's jump into it. But before that, let's recap last week, right? So last week we gave out 19 recommendations. We had 7 guys beat their ECR by 10 spots or more. So we call those big hits. We had another 3 of the 19 guys beat their ECR outright. We had 2 misses, so 2 guys that failed to meet their ECR. And then we had 7 guys that failed to meet their ECR by 10 spots or more. 2 of those guys were injured in their respective games, left the game. So overall, I thought it was a really, really good week. Carson Wentz, he came in with a top 10 QB finish after being ranked outside the top 24 quarterbacks. Justin Fields was ranked quarterback 19. He finished at the QB 4. Quinshon Judkins was the running back 27. He finished as the RB 11. Woody Marks, we talked about as well. He was also a stash on last week's cheat sheet and entering week 4, and he came out in a big way, ranked as the RB 37, finished as the RB 6. We had RJ Harvey, who was the running back 39, finished as the running back 12 on the week. Tyquan Thornton was the wide receiver 60. This one feels a little nasty, but the numbers are the numbers. Finished as a wide receiver 44. Now I don't know how much of that really helped people. He did score a touchdown there. Matthew Golden was the wide receiver 41, finishes the wide receiver 30. Did finish inside that wide receiver 3 range. And then on the hits, Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback 24 on the week, finishes the quarterback 19. He didn't have a fantastic day, but also didn't kill you there. Travion Henderson, that one felt a little dirty as well, finished as the running back 24 after being ranked the running back 30. We thought the workload would see an increase there with the fumbling issues from the other 2 backs from the week before, but we didn't really see that. And luckily for us, he got a goal line touchdown, which he converted on. And Michael Pittman Jr., I think that one was fine. Came in as a wide receiver 29, finishes the wide receiver 22. For the big misses, Geno Smith absolutely destroyed us again. was the quarterback 13, finishes the quarterback 29. So that was absolutely terrible. And it's going to be a while till we officially recommend Geno Smith here on this platform. But Tony Pollard, running back 22 on the week, finishes the running back 32. Chris Olave, wide receiver 25, finishes the wide receiver 40. So it was really the first time he's really let us down in that large of a capacity. Ricky Pearsall, he was one of the guys that got injured, was also a start of the week for me. So wide receiver 21 finishes the wide receiver 43. Sterling Shepard, that one was a swing and a miss. Wide receiver 62 on the week, finishes the wide receiver 76. Darnell Mooney, he's a guy that left injured. He was the wide receiver 43, finishes the wide receiver 94. Trey Tucker, absolute swing and a miss there. I think the process was good. I just think the result was poor, though. Wide receiver 46 on the week, finishes the wide receiver 73. Arunde Gadsden was the tight end 30 coming into the week, finished at the tight end 36, even with some negative game script there for the Chargers. So, I think he's a guy we'll have to pump the brakes on a little bit as we go forward, and have to see how his role develops as the season goes on. And then Keon Coleman was the wide receiver 44 coming into the week, finishes the wide receiver 49. And Bills pass catchers, I think, unless their name is Dalton Kincaid or maybe even a Khalil Shakir, going to stay away from for a little bit, since that passing offense is so spread out until we see some definitive, trends or insights that lean towards one particular player in that wide receiver core. But again, if you are not subscribe to the show, whether you're watching on YouTube, you're watching on Twitch or X, go ahead, give me a follow at the real Jon J _FF. Go ahead, follow the Patreon at or the Fantasy Football Diagnostics page at FF Diagnostics, and you could go ahead and find the link to the Patreon in the show notes, or you can go to patreon.com/FFDX to join as a member. Now, and also, if you're listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, I don't want to miss my, podcast listeners as well. Make sure you are subscribed there as well. So let's jump into the matchups. And first off, we've got the Minnesota Vikings staying out in Europe to take on the Cleveland Browns. So let's go with Minnesota wide receiver Jordan Addison. Addison, in his first game back from suspension, played on 95% of the snaps. He ran just 2 less routes than Justin Jefferson, and he finishes the wide receiver 2 on the week. Sorry, not the wide receiver 2, as a wide receiver 2 on the week with 15 PPR points. Cleveland has allowed the 10th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over the last 3 weeks. So coming into this week, I think he is a wide receiver 2, and should be ranked as such. Moving on to the next matchup here, we've got the Miami Dolphins taking on the Carolina Panthers. And so let's go with Miami tight end Darren Waller. He's the ECR PPR tight end 16. So Waller had the big game last week, 18 PPR points, thanks mostly to 2 touchdown catches. But the raw numbers didn't look great, right? 4 targets, 3 catches, 27 receiving yards. But when you realize he just ran 10 routes on Monday night, it actually looks a little bit better. Assuming he gets the playing time, he gets more playing time this week than he had last week, which you could conceivably make that conclusion, right? He's coming off his first game out of retirement, but it was his first game back as well from a hip injury that he's been dealing with since training camp. So first game back, you think that they're probably going to put him on a little bit of a snap count. And then on top of that, Tyreek Hill, he'll be out for the year. And so Darren Waller could conceivably see even more work due to the injury. So Darren Waller has an ability to make an impact here in the, in the passing game. And this matchup here is actually a pretty good one. Let me go ahead and pull up my handy dandy cheat sheet, which has the matchup rankings as well. Carolina against the tight end allows the 8th most PPR points to opposing tight ends here. So, um, this is a great matchup, great spot, and he's already productive last week, and you're just hoping that as we move forward here, he sees some more utilization there. Moving on to the next game, we've got the New York Giants taking on the New Orleans Saints, and so um, you know, death, taxes, and me talking about Chris Olave on this segment or this part of the show. So anyway, Chris Olave, he's the ECR PPR wide receiver 22. This is the 5th straight week in which we'll be discussing Chris Olave here in this manner. The Giants allowed the 3rd most PPR points to the position last week, but if you are not convinced, right, you are looking at last week and the interception that he threw and barely getting to double-digit PPR points. If you're not convinced, I'll convince you at a little later point in the show. And if you know, and if you don't, you'll just have to stick around to find out. Anyway, let's move on to the Houston Texans against the Baltimore Ravens. And let's talk Houston running back Woody Marks. He's the ECR PPR running back 21. Marks had by far his best game of the season. And while it might be difficult to replicate the 27.9 PPR outing that Marks had in week 4, the matchup this week is even better than it was last week, considering that Baltimore allows the most PPR points to opposing running backs the last 3 weeks. And they have been decimated by injuries significantly. Specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, we know the Lamar Jackson injury, and that one's grabbing all the headlines, but they're missing, I think, 9 or 10 starters on defense, right? So, and this is a defense that was already struggling, right? So, this is a great spot here for Woody Marks, who came through in a big way last week. So let's continue to roll him out there. Let's move on to the next game here. We've got the Las Vegas Raiders against the Indianapolis Colts. And let's talk. You guys are going to, this might give y'all some acid reflux here, but let's talk Las Vegas wide receiver Trey Tucker. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 35. And look, I know some of you may not want to hear it, and I can't blame you, honestly, but Tucker didn't just suck all of a sudden last week. The entire Raiders offense outside of Genty didn't perform well. There are only 21 pass attempts for Geno Smith. Indianapolis is one of the better matchups for opposing passing offenses, allowing the 2nd most PPR points to opposing wide receivers and 7th most to opposing quarterbacks. But they're also top 12 in EPA allowed per pass play. Again, this is a great matchup here. Tucker is still on the field. He's still running the routes. He's still, part of this pass offense. So it's just a matter of, the pendulum swinging in the other direction, right? If a lot of those, if that 60-something yard touchdown that Genty has instead is like a 60-something yard drive where Geno Smith hits a big pass or a few big passes, right? That could even be, more passing yards to him. That could be more reception, or that could be more passing yards for Geno. That could be more receiving yards for Trey Tucker and company. So, if you're hurt at wide receiver, you need a flex in the bye week and whatnot. Make sure you don't overlook Trey Tucker because of the bad week last week. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We've got the Dallas Cowboys taking on the New York Jets, and let's talk. I don't know who needs to hear this, but let's talk Dallas quarterback Dak Prescott, ECR PPR quarterback 11. Again, I don't know who needs to hear it, but play Dak Prescott, please. He's coming off a top 5 performance after back-to-back games inside the top 12. Gets the Jets pass defense that's bottom 6, bottom 7 in EPA allowed per pass play, and yeah, I mean the raw fantasy numbers aren't looking too favorable for the Jets matchup, right? 24th in terms of fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position over their last 3 games here. But if you've just watched them, which, I've watched every Jets game, so you guys don't have to. I would not wish that pain and punishment on any human being, but I've watched every single one, and Dak Prescott is going to annihilate this Jets pass defense. So take that for what you will. Also, if you were like, John, was already planning on playing Dak Prescott. Can you give me some other names? Sure, I can give you some other names. I also like Dallas wide receiver Jalen Tolbert in this game, right? As a secondary option to George Pickens and Jake Ferguson. I also like tight end Mason Taylor, assuming he practices in fully on Friday. And then running back, New York Jets running back Isaiah Davis, I think also has some flex appeal as an RB3 if you're like hurting at the position, right? Like, I've got teams where I've got Josh Jacobs on bye. I've got Bijan on bye. I've got, a Bucky Irving who's banged up. These are all three of these guys are not on the same team, but I have combinations where two of the three are on the same team. But anyway, um, so there are situations or there are leagues where I'm like, and Isaiah Davis doesn't seem too bad, right? Um, in the same game, Jaden Blue, he's a guy that we talked about on the waiver wire pod. Actually, we didn't talk about him on the waiver wire pod, and that is why you need to get plugged into the Patreon, because the weekly waiver wire article that went out on Patreon got updated, and all the patrons that are members, the members are patrons, they got a notification that the article was updated to include Jaden Blue as well as another rookie running back. I'm not going to say his name, but if you want to know who it is, you can go check out the waiver wire article, which is completely free this week, and you can go see who that is. But again, just another opportunity for you guys to get in there and extract all the wonderful benefits that the Patreon page has to offer. But I go back to what I was saying. Jaden Blue is a guy that I think is worth a stash here. And so you've got an extra roster spot. It doesn't hurt to just throw them in there. I know for me, like I can't spare the roster spots. Like I've got a lot of Rashid Rice. I've got, with players being injured, like a George Kittle and so on and so forth. Like I'm hurting right now. So, um, I can't stash a Jaden Blue, but maybe you can. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We got the Denver Broncos against the Philadelphia Eagles, and we've got Denver quarterback Bo Nix here. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 13 according to Fantasy Pros. Now, Nix is coming off his best game of the season, 326 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. And the Philadelphia matchup looks scary on paper, but they allow the 11th most fantasy points to the quarterback position over their last 3 games. And, Nix also provides a nice floor with his legs. So, Bo Nix he hasn't really been like, the top quarterback option that we saw from him last year, right? I think last year he was perpetually the QB1 from like week 5 on or week 6 on. And so, we haven't really seen that from him this year. But I will tell you, right, if you listened to the waiver wire pod on Tuesday, rather, we talked about Troy Franklin, we talked about Marvin Mims, and we talked about their upcoming schedule, right, against 3 games against defenses that are inside the top 10 in terms of EPA allowed, in terms of most EPA allowed per pass play. So, Bo Nix does have some appeal, not just this week, but as we move forward here. Moving on to the next game, let's talk the Tennessee Titans against the Arizona Cardinals. And this is going to get a little interesting, right? Because we're talking about a flag plant scenario here. So we're talking Arizona running back Michael Carter, who's, according to Fantasy Pros, is the expert consensus PPR running back 36. Now, Trey Benson just went on IR, and it's possible that the Cardinals could go with Amari DiMarcado as their lead back here. But I think they mainly view him as a pass-catching running back. Michael Carter makes a lot of sense as an early down running back, and we also know he has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield as well. I think either makes sense, but if you ask me, John, who do you believe is going to be the lead back here for the Cardinals? I'm going to have to say Michael Carter. Again, I could totally be wrong here. I think both make sense as plays. For all I know, it could be Bam Knight by Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. But right now, we know Trey Benson's going to be on. We know Trey Benson's on IR, so it's not one of those situations where we're waiting for a player to be ruled out or anything, but Michael Carter makes he's makes sense as a desperation play. And I don't want to say desperation play, but like a fill in if you lost Trey Benson, or maybe you're waiting on Bucky Irving's status, or Chuba Hubbard even, right? So Michael Carter, he could be, I think, RB 36. I think he could beat that. I see him probably closer between that RB 30 to RB 36 range, based on a pretty solid matchup here against Tennessee, allowing the fourth most PPR points to running backs over their last 3 games. So moving on to the next game, let's talk the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Seattle Seahawks, and let's talk Seattle quarterback Sam Darnold. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 16. Darnold has performed well the last 3 weeks with at least 15.8 fantasy points in standard quarterback scoring. And Tampa Bay has allowed a QB1 performance in 3 of the last 4 games, 3 of the last 4 quarterbacks that they've faced this year. So Darnold makes a ton of sense this week. Obviously, he's got, he's able to throw the ball to JSN. He's able to use his legs. So, and this offense is playing really well right now. So, I do like Sam Darnold for those looking for a quarterback-worthy a stream-worthy quarterback. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We've got the Washington Commanders taking on the LA Chargers, and let's talk about our buddy Bill, Washington running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He's the ECR PPR running back 31. We're just taking a chance here on a talented rookie, and while he's in a 3-headed backfield, he's still the most talented and most efficient running back on this team. He leads the team in rushing yards over expected. All right, so he's overperforming based on what the yardage that he should be getting, and matchup isn't that great, right? The matchup's not that great this game. The LA Chargers, they allow the 29th most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games, but in a game tied for the 3rd highest total on the week, sitting here at 47.5. There should be some touchdown opportunities for both teams, but Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, again, we're taking the shot on the talent here and hoping that with the efficiency that he's been running with, that it breaks through here and lands with a big day. So let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the Detroit Lions taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, and let's talk Detroit wide receiver Jameson Williams. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 30. Cincinnati's 8th in terms of EPA allowed per pass play. And while Jameson has been somewhat unreliable week to week, that's kind of the nature of who he is, right? Like when you drafted a Jameson Williams, you kind of knew this is what you were getting to an extent, right? A volatile wide receiver who's going to have some, dud weeks, but also is going to bring you some, big time weeks, right? So this Cincinnati defense is such a nice matchup. They allow the 12th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. And so I'm calling my shot here for Jameson Williams to make a couple big plays and possibly even get in the end zone here. Let's move on to Sunday Night Football, as we've got the New England Patriots taking on the Buffalo Bills. And I'm feeling a little petty here. So let's go New England wide receiver Stephon Diggs. Comes into the week as the expert consensus ranking wide receiver 29, according to Fantasy Pros. And Diggs is coming off his best game of the season, where he had 6 catches on 7 targets for 101 receiving yards. He led all New England wide receivers in routes run. And in a game where they are significant underdogs here, 8.5 points, I believe. Yeah, 8.5 points. They should be throwing the ball a lot here. So I like Diggs to make an impact here. Plus, I'm saying I like to be petty, but we all know who really likes to be petty, Stephon Diggs. And it's a revenge game for Stephon Diggs against the Buffalo Bills, who traded him away. So do with that information what you will, but I think Stephon Diggs, all jokes aside, is a sneaky, solid play at the wide receiver position. And last but not least, let's talk the Kansas City Chiefs against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this game looked a little ugly, right? It didn't look like there was a ton of options here. I mean, outside of the top guys, right? Like we're talking, you know, Patrick Mahomes, Xavier Worthy, Travis Etienne, right? Where those guys, obviously you're going to play them. Did I say Travis Kelsey? I wanted to say that I thought about putting Travis Kelsey on this in this spot here, but he was already ranked inside the top 10 of tight ends, so that made it really impossible for me to choose him as a player to play. So instead, I went to the other side. I went with Jacksonville tight end Brenton Strange, and now Brenton Strange is, he's got back-to-back games with double-digit PPR points, and he's got back-to-back games with 6 catches on 7 targets. The matchup doesn't look great on paper, but Strange will see his fair share of targets for the Jaguars here, so I think he's a solid play. Now, if y'all have questions, listeners out there that are watching live, y'all got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat because we are nearing the end of the show here. So I will, leave some time for some questions at the end. But if there are no questions, we're just going to wrap it up before we get after we get into the starts of the week. So I'll give you guys an opportunity to get some questions in there if you got them. But I'm going to move on to the starts of the week at this time. So let's get it going. Week 5 fantasy football starts of the week. Last week, pretty solid week, y'all. Pretty solid week. Jordan Love finished as the QB5. Omarion Hampton finished as the running back 7. Ricky Pearsall, like we talked about, was injured, finished as the running back 43. And then Jake Ferguson at tight end finished as the tight end 5 on the week. So this week, let's get into this week's starts of the week, and let's start at the quarterback position, and let's talk New York Jets quarterback Justin Fields as he faces the Dallas Cowboys. Fields delivered last week as the QB4, had 81 rushing yards on top of some solid passing numbers. This week he's been set up even better. Dallas has allowed the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. I think Fields has legit QB1 upside, QB1 overall upside, at least top 3 here in this game when you consider, the matchup. Excuse me. When you consider the matchup as well as what Fields can do with his legs. Let's move on to the running back start of the week, and let's talk New York Giants running back Cam Skattebo going up against the New Orleans Saints. Skattebo dominated with a 78% running back rush share. 27 total opportunities last week. Now he gets a Saints defense that's allowed the 11th most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games, including 3 straight RB1 performances. Workhorse role plus matchup equals smash. Cam Skattebo smash. Anyway, let's move on to the wide receiver position. Let's talk New Orleans wide receiver Chris Olave. Like I said, if you know, you know. The production hasn't matched the usage yet. Wide receiver 27 in PPR points with only 1 top 24 finish, but he's 2nd in the NFL in targets, 5th in routes run, 4th in end zone looks, top 10 in unrealized air yards. Guys, regression is coming, and he gets a Giants defense here, giving up the 3rd most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games, also having allowed each wide receiver that's seen double-digit targets against them to be a wide receiver 1. Olave has seen double-digit targets in all but 1 game so far this year. This is the spot. Moving on to the tight end position, let's talk Las Vegas tight end Brock Bowers versus the Indianapolis Colts. Bowers has been managing a knee injury, but last week he still posted a 30% target share despite lighter usage. Now he faces an Indianapolis defense that hasn't been tested by a top tight end yet. They have not been tested by a top tight end yet. However, they're still 14th in terms of PPR points allowed to the position over their last 3 games. With his talent, this could be a breakout game that we've been waiting for, right? I know you guys probably drafted Brock Bowers in top 2 rounds of your fantasy drafts. You haven't really seen the return on your investment. He's been banged up with the knee injury. I think he's working his way back to some semblance of health. And I think this is a great spot here for him, especially when you consider how good the matchup is in the passing game. All right, y'all. That is all I got for the week 5 matchup show. That's all I got for the fantasy football starts of the week. Again, just make sure you're tapped in with everything I'm doing at the real Jon Jeune _FF, at FF Diagnostics. Follow me on Patreon as well. If you want access to my 100% free fantasy football diagnostics cheat sheet, again, matchups, player utilization, rankings. I got buy sells stashes in there as well. So make sure you go take a look at that. It's not going to cost you anything at all. And if you do want that extra edge for $1 a month, you can get expanded rankings, Sunday morning Q&A, as well as a weekly waiver wire article. So, and you'll get updates like the one that I provided on Tuesday. Tuesday after the waiver wire show had hit, after we found some more news, right? So if you want to know, you're really curious, like, damn, what is Jon thinking, between Wednesday and Friday as some of these things happen, right? Even yesterday, I wanted to give some insight on Thursday Night Football, but I didn't, unfortunately. I wish I did, because Kendrick Bourne was like one of the top guys for me. So, but going forward, right, some things like that will happen, right? So make sure you're tapped into the Patreon, because that's where a lot of the stuff is going to go, right? I know social media, that's great. Personally, I don't. As much as I used to be on social media, and if you guys follow me from back in the day, I used to be on X all the time, or Twitter back then, tweeting constantly. I don't really do that anymore. I only really go on social media, post content, leave whatever. But patrons, that's kind of where I'm tapped in right now. So pouring into them. So if you want more, then you got to go over there, and that's where it's going to be. So again, don't have to join the support the show tier. If you want an extra edge, you can join the support the show tier, only $1 a month. But yeah, that's it. But good luck, y'all. Good luck this weekend. Good luck in all your matchups. I hope you guys crush it. Hope we crush it. And I'll be back here Tuesday for the week 6 waiver show. But until then, y'all, good luck. I appreciate y'all for rocking with me like you always do. And we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.